The San Francisco... Oh, no. The San Francisco Museum of Modern Art just announced a collaboration exhibition with RM of BTS. This is music to my ears. I am a philosophy major with an special interest in philosophy of art, and I love BTS. So in today's video, I'm gonna talk about the press releases. I'm gonna investigate a little bit of the artists mentioned in the possible exhibition, go through the history of several of the artists on this exhibition. In a press release, the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art announces RM by SFMoMA, the first museum exhibition featuring artworks from the personal collection of RM, 21st century pop icon BTS, and curated by RM with exhibition co-curators América, Castillo and Hyoeun of the SFMoMA. In an exclusive US presentation at the SFMoMA from October 26 to February 2027. So this is a really long exhibition, like 5 months, like about 5 months of an exhibition. This exhibition will bring together 200 works from the collection of RM and SFMoMA, offering a rare chance to see modern Korean artworks in conversation with contemporary artworks from around the world. Many of the artworks have never been exhibited to the public before. So this is a very exciting exhibition. SFMoMA, it's a very prestigious and important museum, especially in the West Coast of the United States, since a lot of the most important exhibitions are on the East Coast. And the importance, well, but it is one of the leading West Coast institutions in the United States. But it is also quite impressive that it's 200 works. That's a lot of it. Yes, that's quite a big exhibition with both RM's personal collections, which I'm so excited that we get to experience. Hopefully I can travel from Mexico to there, but if not, hopefully there will be an online exhibition and the MoMA artworks. And it's also exciting that it says that some of them have never been exhibited to the public. So these are archives, I'm assuming, from the San Francisco MoMA Museum. Quoting RM, "We live in an age defined by boundaries. This exhibition at SFMoMA reflects those boundaries between East and West, Korea and America, the modern and the contemporary, the personal and the universal. I don't want to prescribe how these works should be seen, whether out of curiosity or study. All perspectives are welcome. My only hope is that this exhibition can be a small but sturdy bridge for many," said RM. I cannot begin to express how present this exhibition is needed and how beautifully RM put it, this tension. And I want you to remember RM's last album, Right Place, Wrong People. I forget. And I will put some videos here where you can watch my analysis. But one of the main analysis that I have is this tension that RM lives, in which something is really affecting his personal life because of external circumstances that seem to be in opposition with each other. And he explored that opposition in the way that the music itself was presented. There was this dissonant melodies that came with the saxophone and the bass and the drums that play with the electronic elements of the music and the acoustic elements of his music. So RM, we can read a lot of RM's work through that tension. He is a Korean artist that has been immersed in an American culture, that when they travel to America, they have been like very violently rejected by the institutions. He lived in a Korea that was hyper modern, hyper contemporary, but really Korea is in its infancy, because not long ago Korean wasn't this modern like home of technology that it is today. So his whole life and his Korean identity is in tension with old and new. And I want to explore the word boundary. What boundaries do, they necessarily separate us. I talked about Bansky's latest work and how he has always used the wall, the physical wall, as a representation of exclusion, and how you can change that exclusion by transforming the wall itself. So we are in a society that is excluded, that is hyper, how would you say it? Hyper radicalized, and everything is in tension, and we have been in tension even more because of algorithms that separate us in boundaries. To the algorithm, we're audiences that niche us down to certain things. So it is entirely possible that what it was for me, that I didn't know who Mr. Beast was, because the algorithm never presented any video of Mr. Beast to me because I'm not their audience, though he is the biggest YouTuber. I think he's still the biggest YouTuber as of late. So the way the world is built today is built on these boundaries that separate us. And doing a exhibition of art where those boundaries are reflected on and almost transgressed by bringing together the East and the West, Korea and America, the modern and the contemporary, the personal and the universal, is a very poignant way, a very poignant criticism of these boundaries. And I would argue that it is a political statement about those boundaries, though I don't want to say them because I don't want to put any words in RM's mouth that are not there, and I don't want to bring controversy to where he didn't have to say it. But I thought it was also amazing because in an age where we're truly experiencing the radicalization of all communities and the rise of fascism in America, this exploration is more than important. And it is also very poignant, the artists that they're gonna be presenting, because those artists talked about a similar time that they lived through in the late 1800s, but really it was the early 1900s, in which also the rise of fascism, the rise of inequality was a pretty big theme that affected artists. And art has always been a way to explore those boundaries and break those boundaries and ask questions. I think it's important to understand that art is there for us to ask questions. So don't just buy my explanation, don't just buy RM's explanation, don't just buy the San Francisco MOMA Museum's explanation, create your own. I also thought it was important to have this announcement, and I'm gonna be a little political at the moment, because as you may know, there has been a rising tension, international relations between Korea and America due to the deportation of several Korean people who had come to America to help build a Hyundai factory, I think it was Hyundai, in order to train American workers. And this marked a very divergent point of view in which American and Korean relationships have been had, because they have always been great allies. This sentiment by Korean people and Korean Americans, in which they said they told us to come here and they told us to teach Americans so that they can have this technology. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it was something to do with batteries or superconductors, but this is a technology that the America needs to have. There was this type of betrayal, and I wanted to bring into the conversation how in the rise of fascism in America, this has been something that has always been done. I wanted to talk about a program called the Bracero program. The Bracero program was a program by the United States government to explicitly bring over Mexican people to work in the United States. Was a temporary labor initiative between the United States and Mexico that allowed Mexican workers to be employed in the United States agricultural and railroad industry from 1942 to 1964. This started from the need of workers in agriculture and in railroads, because the American workers were at war in World War II, and they continued to be at war through both the Korean War, and I don't think they were at war with Vietnam at this point, but Anyways, there was a shortage of American workers due to them being conscripted or inscripted to the military and them fighting wars. And so they created this legal program called bracero. Bracero is a Latin word called like laborer, in which they require the work of Mexican people. Once the Mexican people were not longer needed by the United States, and the rise of fascism, or really the rise of neoliberalism with like Reagan, etc., these types of programs that were legal and encouraged by the United States started to persecute Mexican people and Hispanic people. So now, a few 80 years later, the same dynamics we saw in the relationship between Mexican laborers are being seen in the Korean laborers, in which the United States needs to develop its technology because they're falling behind in superconductors and lithium battery making, which is a leading industry for Korea and other places like Taiwan. So they required those workers to come to America so they can teach them and they can develop those industries. But now in America, because of the rise of fascism, which parallels, for example, the rise of Reaganomics, they are now being persecuted and treated as criminals, even though both the Bracero people and the Korean people who were working at this Hyundai factory were not criminals. You can see how in the way history has developed, those boundaries between the American, the West, and the East, and even places like Latin America, have always been in tension because they have needed each other. But because of these other external circumstances, like the demonization of people who are others, become too like fraught. So in that context, in which right now the Korean relationships with America are going through a crisis, and in the context in which BTS had like almost criminally excluded from the American industries by not being nominated by Grammys, by not winning Grammys, by being looked at as just a one-thing wonder and not believing in their talent. This exploration between the East and the West could not have come from only America, because America is going through this crisis moment in which they are rejecting the other, the non-American, the non-Americana culture. So bringing an exhibition which explores those themes directly might not seem political, but it's extremely political and poignant to the current state of the socioeconomic state of the world. And it's also important to understand that Korea it's on its way of becoming one of the top leading economies in the world because of how advanced they are economically. But they are also in almost like the adolescence of Korea, because anyways, this is not a thing for me to say, but you can read the interview with El País that RM had, in which he explains how they had to like grow up really fast in order to catch up to the rest of the world. So let's continue with the press release. Drawn to the artist's thoughtfully assembled collections of modern and contemporary art, the SFMoMA invited RM to create the first exhibition to showcase his collection in this collaborative presentation. Quote, visitors will have an unprecedented opportunity to explore RM's beautiful and contemplative collection of paintings and sculptures in dialogue with works from SFMoMA's holdings, inviting us to make new discoveries and reflect our own relationships with art, said Janet Bishop, Thomas Weisel Family Chief Curator and at SFMoMA. Among the key figures of modern and contemporary Korean art represented in the collection of RM are Hyoeun, Park Ri-hyun, Kwon Ok-yeon, Kim Yoon-shin, To Sang-bong, and Chang Woo-chin. I'm sorry, I don't know Korean, so I'm sorry if I mispronounce. In addition to works by numerous notable contemporary artists based around the world, RM and by SFMoMA will highlight resonances and themes among these works and contemporary SFMoMA collections art works by Korean artists Among these works and contemporary SFMoMA collection artworks by Korean artist Kim Waki, as well as American and European artists such as Mark Rothko, Agnes Martin, Henri Matisse, Georgia O'Keeffe, and Paul Kell. This is the most interesting part to me. I want to make a follow-up video on the Korean artists since I don't know them. But I do know about Mark Rothko, Agnes Martin, Henri Matisse, Georgia O'Keeffe, and Paul Kelly, which a lot of them are modern artists, but a lot of them are also contemporary artists. For example, I want to show you Mark Rothko. He is a artist that immigrated from like Soviet Russia to the United States, and so his art is deeply impacted by like that experience, which is inherently political. And so he did surrealism, cubism, abstract art. There's this movement between modern art and contemporary art that happened because of the development of technology. And so there's a theory of philosophy, and just a disclaimer, I don't really believe in this theory, that says that the evolution of art, or the history of art, has always evolved since the Greeks or before in order to perfect the imitations of the form. But because the inception of the camera, artists had to reimagine their relationship to reproductions of forms, and so they had to ask, what is art? And because of this ask of what is art, we have works of art like Dadaism, like Cubism, like the 433 piece in music from John Cage, I think it's John Cage, that makes us wonder and like confronts us with the question of what is art. I don't really believe in that, because it leaves behind a lot of, like, for example, taking a lecture on philosophy of music, and music cannot really be viewed through the lens of imitation. Anyways, so Mark Rothko, we could say that he had a very similar experience to RM, in which he came from a Korean world and influenced by American artists and an admirer of American culture like rap. He confronted the world of America through a very different lens, because he was othered by the American industry. And all of the works are an expression of that otherness. And so think about feeling othered in this way that we are like divided by cultures, by walls, by physical limits in our like migration, and hostile environments like the one the Korean workers just faced, and how radical and tender it is to search the resonances in those works. Because if we go back to the press release says, highlight resonances and themes shared among these works and contemporary and complementary SFMoMA collections. So the reason to bring together divergent views, divergent artists from different works of lives is not to highlight the differences, but to recognize the similarities, in which at the end of the day we're all human beings, and we are all facing socio-political, economical circumstances and radicalization that affects us all in different ways. So bringing together the similarities in such a disparity of world is a proposition in itself. To look at us as human beings, not as others, not as migrants, not as criminals, not as etc. Like things like that. Agnes Martin, I think she's a Canadian. Is she? No, that is, let me see. Yes, she's a Canadian. I know my story. She's Canadian, but she, I think, if I'm not mistaken, she explored themes in like Freudian psychology, And no, she's minimalism. Her this is from Wikipedia. Her paintings, statements, and influential writings are often reflected an interest in Eastern philosophy, especially Taoist, because her work added spiritual dimensions which became more and more dominant after 1967. She preferred to be classified as an abstract expressionist. This artist has already been exploring Eastern philosophy, like Taoist, and Taoism is very interesting because it's not one of the philosophies that the Western world studies from the Eastern world. I think the Western world is very acquainted with Buddhism, very acquainted with Confucianism, but less so Taoism. And I read a book, an Oxford book on like the introduction to Confucian theory, which at the beginning it explains how Confucianism in the West has been viewed as a collection of Western thought in our own world, like our own Western mind, in which, in fact, what we know of Confucianism is an amalgamation of different Eastern philosophies, like Taoism, like Buddhism, like Korean Confucianism, and Neo-Confucianism. So even the way we explore Eastern philosophies, and I'm gonna put the reference to the Oxford, I think it was one Oxford and one Cambridge book that I read, where it explains how it has always been difficult for Western people to view Eastern philosophy and Eastern art by itself. We have always seen it through the lens of Western philosophy, and what we commit is therefore a sort of, we cannot really understand it by itself. We see it through this lens, and I think bringing together this exhibition where they brings together East and West recognizes that we are not able to like look at it like I as a Mexican person cannot ever experience a Korean artwork like a Korean person can, because I don't have that culture, like life experience that will inform it. However, it doesn't mean that I'm not able to engage with it. We can engage with it by looking at this other like human nature, like the way art has affected us. Henri Matisse, he lived through the World War II, and he was like the precursor of these, like at the end of the modern art and the beginning of the contemporary art, in which the forms of art had they changed. We were not really trying to conceive a perfect imitation of the world, but express other things in artwork. So that's why also the exploration of colors that will later be seen in a more like abstract way through like Kandinsky and everything like that, it's already there, like the expressionism. Well, though Kandinsky is not a good example because not really about expression in Kandinsky. Anyways, Georgia O'Keeffe, she is the one that I think explored themes in Freud. Let me see. Here we can start seeing like the echoes of contemporary art, in which the thoughts and expressions of the artist are much more important than they used to be, and these abstractions were like in a way trying to like express that. And in philosophy, I know more about philosophy because I studied philosophy. There are three philosophers that are called filósofos de la sospecha. I think in English would be philosophers of doubt, where they realized that what we had been seeing in philosophers like Kant or Hegel, that we could explain the world because we could see the world, like the physical manifestation of the world is what there was, and there was nothing metaphysical in the world. These three philosophers started to put into question those views, and those philosophers are Freud, in which he explored how there is this unknown, unseeable thing below us that were our physical psychology, alongside with Lacan and I forget, and this other it's the shadow work. Anyways, Then there was Freud, there was Nietzsche, in which he explored how history is not really a set of facts but a narrative on what we call and what we tell ourselves, and how important language is to understanding the world. And so this is something that it's underbelly, that it's not physical, that we cannot touch and not see, but it's there. And then there was Marx, and Marx explained the relationships to the world through an economical system that, again, we cannot see economics, we cannot touch economics, but it's something that conditions the world, and there's something more there. All of this philosophy, especially I would say Nietzsche and Freud, are important to contemporary artworks, because contemporary artworks leaving behind, if we believe that before contemporary art, artists wanted to perfect the imitation of form, then afterwards, since we realized that there was something there more, that it's more than just the form itself, but something below us, some expression below it, some narrative that we could tell ourselves about the world and therefore about art, are important philosophers to understand in order to understand also contemporary art. For me, I like to gravitate more toward Walter Benjamin and how he explored this turn on art, which was affected by the rise of a certain technology. La obra de arte en su época de la reproductibilidad, I think it's called. Let me look at the name in English. Yeah, the work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction. If you want to know something about this, I want you to read this essay. And his conclusion is that in order for us to look at art or to appreciate art, we have to look at the aura of the art in itself. But how can we find an aura on different types of works? It comes from diverse places, like literally the other end of the world, the America and like San Francisco to Korea. If we do not understand that the aura in itself, it's not marked by the physical boundaries, like geographical ones, like language barriers, like cultural differences, but an aura in itself that is a response to a human nature. Anyways, I have rambled a lot this time. My want is that maybe I will do a series of videos on each of the artists, so that we can when October comes, we can all go to the exhibition and have a little bit of a historical and philosophical understanding of the artists and their artworks itself, so that we can experience the art in that way. But how, and I really like this, how RM says he doesn't want to condition our own experience, and I think that's true. You can go and without any knowledge, but I'm such a nerd that I want to have more philosophic, and this is going to help me with my philosophy degree either way. One of the other philosophers that I would like you to read is Gadamer. And Gadamer, he is a hermeneutical philosopher. What he said in one of his works about philosophy of art is that an artwork in itself is not completed ever until it reaches its audience, meaning an artwork will always be in works, because when we go and experience art, it's a different person at different times. So we can experience the same art piece 2 different times, and it could be a new artwork, because the interactions, there's a play. He talks about the play between the artwork in itself and the person who experienced the art. There's a play, and there's these like relationships that go in through experiencing art that result in the culmination of the artwork in itself. So I think it would be best if we all see these artworks in the SFMoMA as a play between the art and us, the audience. And I would say let's engage in that play so that we can complete each artwork in itself. And again, it gets completed time and time again. So in a way, it's a work of art. It's never finished because we can always reinterpret it. Anyways, this was a very rambling video. I made it this morning because of the news of last night of the SFMoMA, but in reality I don't think I will be coming back anytime soon. I'm still at my parents' house. My mom had to be hospitalized on the 15th. I had surgery on the 17th. We were both discharged at the same time, but my mom was later diagnosed with like a blood cancer thingy. I don't know. So she's hospitalized again, and things are very grim. So yeah, I don't think I have the mind to make many videos. If I do make them, I probably like be rambling like this one. But I also wanted to talk about this because I feel, and I have also often felt, like we're in like the dumbest timeline possible. Like I look at the world and I see like, ugh, how can the world be this way? Like in the macroeconomical sense and in the personal, like in my personal life, why is my mom going through these stuffs? But these sort of explorations that like prompt us to look at things beyond the boundaries, like the humanness in each of us, like sometimes helps us heal parts of ourselves. Walter Benjamin, I probably will be doing a thesis on Walter Benjamin. That's why I'm talking about him a lot. But he talks about the narrative that we tell ourselves. And this goes to both the narrative about art, but also the narrative about history and how important that is. This is also a theme, like we can see glimpses of that in Nietzsche. So in the meantime, you might catch me in the real world, like trying to tell myself a narrative on like how did we get here? Because I feel like this is a very dumb state of the world, and yet here we are. So I will try to narrate myself into an understanding of the state of things in my personal life and in like the world itself. Anyways, thank you for watching. If I do feel like I have the time to talk more about the artists, I would want to make a series on each of them so that we can explore. And I especially want to make a series on the Korean artists because I don't know anything about them. So yeah, you might catch me doing that. Anyways, thank you for watching. If you like this video, please subscribe. It means the world to me. And until then, I see you when I see you. La pata, no. La pata, sí, la pata. Mwah.